Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. On this episode of Writers at Work, I'll be speaking with Virginia Feito, author of Victorian Psycho, a title that is ideal, yet only hints at what lies between the book covers. Victorian Psycho is Virginia's second novel. Her 2021 debut, Mrs. March, straddled the line between psychological thriller and social satire, said Vogue magazine, adding that it's as literary as it is pulpy. It was snapped up by Hollywood and is under development with Elisabeth Moss attached as star and producer. I'll have to ask Virginia about its progress to screen. I'll also have to ask her about how she wrote a novel so keenly praised for its precision in depicting the foibles of New York's upwardly mobile, despite her having never lived in New York. She was raised in Madrid and Paris and studied in London. She writes in English. I admit to a particular fascination with her latest Victorian Psycho. On the surface, it's a gruesome tale of a psychopathic governess, Winifred Noddy, immune to fear, dismissive of pain, who carries within her a darkness, capital D darkness. Much explicit violence ensues. Not your cup of tea? Let me say this. Victorian Psycho contains some of the most perfectly constructed sentences I've ever read, each word carefully chosen to elicit a squeamish reaction, yet they flow together with ease. The writing, as much as the psychological terror, oozed its way under my skin. I can't remember the last time I came across a novel that compelled me to tap my wife on the shoulder and read a few sentences aloud, and then do the same thing a few minutes later, and then again. Victorian Psycho has been optioned as well, and I'm told Margaret Qualley will play Miss Noddy. And so I say, Virginia Feito, welcome to Writers at Work. Virginia, early in my career in journalism, I was told that the best kind of compliment a columnist could receive was if someone had no interest in the subject matter, yet read the story to its conclusion. I confess that going into Victorian Psycho, I thought, I am not going to like this book. But I loved it. I loved it. Have you gotten have you gotten that reaction from readers?
Maybe not as honest. Thank you. I'm so glad. I thought that was going in a different direction for a moment, and I was like, well, this will be interesting. No, I think most reviews I've sort of read that are sort of more positive maybe are people who really love and enjoy Victorian literature, for example, or alternatively literature about psychopaths. So I think there's usually like an interest there. But I'm so intrigued to know that were you not interested at all by any of the topics or
no, the
historical context?
The title was alluring, of course.
Sure.
I knew of your first book, so I wanted to read it. But it's just not my
Right.
cup of tea. And
Got
it. But isn't that what's wonderful about having such a giant supply of books to read?
Oh, yeah.
We read something that we didn't know we would even enjoy.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm very glad that you did in the end. But I guess it's not a historical novel per se. I think so. There's a little bit of everything for everyone potentially in it.
Well, we say at Writers at Work that this is not marketing, that this is journalism. But
right.
But I really did love this book, honestly, and I'm going to be hand selling it. I'm telling you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. Anyway, how did it come about? When did you first start thinking about Miss Noddy and her story?
Yeah, it was 2020. It was right smack in the beginning of the pandemic. We were all locked up very recently at home. I had just sold my first novel, Mrs. March, and I just come back from New York from meeting with editors, and we all locked up, and the world kind of closed down and imploded in a way. And so I was thinking of a new idea to kind of keep moving forward, and I was also it was a weird time. I was very motivated that I just sold my debut, but I was also, this was happening in the world, and suddenly we're all, caged, and it was a mix of very complicated feelings. I lost my grandma at the beginning to the COVID, and couldn't, and we couldn't meet, we couldn't say goodbye. And I had my mom on the phone. It was her mother, and she was, obviously very upset, and I couldn't help her either. And I was in a very strange mood, but also felt kind of guilty because I was very happy because I was starting a career as a writer, which had been a
Yes.
lifelong dream. So this was where I was at emotionally when I first thought of Miss Naughty and her voice, and I started to kind of develop this idea for a novella, and started to the research essentially, and reading up on Victorian era and cases. And it was such a weird, surreal moment. And what I was reading was very weird and surreal, and it was making me very angry. And it was just it was a lot of emotions that made me want to numb them. And I think that was the origin story for the atmosphere of this book.
Mm. Was there a particular image or event that you came up with that was the spark?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it vividly. It was at night. I had maybe trouble sleeping, or I don't know, or maybe I just wanted to get up for a glass of water. I don't remember exactly, but I remember I was waking up sort of in the middle of the night, and I was continuously thinking about this new idea that might form or not. And I thought of a sentence that is still in the book to this day, which is about her breast jiggling in her corset. My breast
Yes.
jiggling in my corset. That was the line. And that, and just with that one silly line, I understood immediately who the character was. I
Yes.
understood it was a period, but also kind of anachronistic, and, sassy and sarcastic and angry and a lot of things, just from that one line. So that was the spark. And then I
Yeah.
just built everything else around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ask, and maybe this is in your experience also. I think some readers are surprised to know how little it takes for us to see the possibility of a story.
Yeah.
In my next novel, I had one image, a priest diving off a pier to save an infant, and nothing else, nothing else.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
bet you know that feeling, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and that's a great image, by the way, with the priest. But yeah, that's all it takes. And I guess it also, similar to like, maybe relationship, like romantic relationships, they also say that timing is very important. You have to kind of be open to it, so to speak. It has to be like the right moment. So I don't think it's just the spark, but I think it's, yeah, all you need is just a little, one line, one image, something very small, but also you have to be in the right mood, like in a receiving mood, to kind of, want to delve into that, because it's going to be a very intense relationship with this book, essentially. So you have to really be ready for it, I think, in time and space.
There's something terrifying yet exciting about that moment, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I think it's for me, I think it's my favorite thing. It's the blank page, ironically. Not afraid of writer's block yet, but I love it because you haven't fucked up yet, right? So it's just full of possibilities and hope, that beginning.
Right, right. You speak French, yes. You do,
Yes,
right?
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
No, when the French call it blank paper.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I thought you were making a joke because I'm so foul mouthed. I thought
No, no, not at all. Oh
I
God.
thought it was like, pardon my French.
No, not at all. We had a guest recently, and we had to actually said it was not safe for work. She swore every sentence. It was
Oh, good.
really shocking. No, but I mean I love that expression, blank paper. Rather
Blank
than
paper.
right. Yeah, I just love that expression.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. Did your agent or publisher want Mrs. March too?
Do what? Sorry.
Did your agent or publisher want you to write Mrs.
Mhm.
March too?
Oh, Mrs. March 2, the
Yeah,
sequel? No,
part two.
nobody,
Yeah.
nobody has,
Whoa!
no, nobody
Wow!
has asked me this there, which, I love my team for that as well, because I don't know how I would respond to that. I think it's just sort of perfect on its own. I think they would agree. We've joked about it, Mrs. March in prison or whatever, but no, no, it hasn't
No.
been a serious suggestion by any means. No.
Oh, that's fantastic, though.
I think so. Yeah, that's making me feel very safe right now and appreciate something that I hadn't previously appreciated. Now that you
Yeah.
mention it, nobody has, no, thank goodness. I think it's for the best.
Oh, there's a level of trust there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody has pressured me into that or even like raised that topic. No. No, they're very, yeah.
Oh,
No.
that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I want to
might
go.
be fun. Now I kind of want to do it.
We'll take a time out. Go. No, so I want to get back to Victorian Psycho. Um,
Yeah.
do you plow through when you write your first draft? I mean, what's your focus? Story, style?
Yeah, I kind of do. I kind of go into it a little chaotically. I don't love to plan. I don't love to outline. I feel like not wasting time, but I feel like I want to get to the good part, which is the writing of the thing. So, outlining makes me kind of anxious. So I do it if I do it, it's very, very general and brief and doesn't really mean anything because I just will ignore it so I just kind of go into it and swim in it and see what happens. And then it starts to like form and I don't know, and some scenes that I fall in love with, and obviously others that don't work. But essentially, yeah, I just go for it in a whirlwind of panic and chaos and hope, and see what happens on the other end.
Yeah. When did you find your groove in terms of pace and language? Did you have that voice from the early draft, or did it evolve?
Yeah, no, the voice stayed. The voice was what for the, that first sentence that I mentioned that I found, and that was the voice that I kept throughout the whole thing. And it didn't waver, but I did have trouble with this one in terms of the balance of the violence, how far to go with it, how far to go with the sort of like anguish and just desperation generally. And at first it was completely plotless and it did not have any like chapters. Basically, it had no chapters and it had no sort of hope for the reader of any kind, shape, or form. And I did have to I edited it quite a bit. And yeah, my agent kind of raised his hand with the first draft and was like, let's talk because it was maybe too much, too exasperating and too complicated to get into and too relentless and too repetitive, I think. Probably the first version. Maybe not. Maybe it was genius. We'll never know. Maybe it was much better. I would have won I don't know, Nobel Prize, but probably not. It wasn't really working. And then I went into like a spiral, like a downward spiral. I'm new at this, so I thought that essentially they were telling me it's absolute shit and you must burn it to the ground and never write again, which is not what they were saying. They were just like, let's maybe change this this
Right.
thing. But then I went insane and then I switched it to third person, which was a huge mistake. And slowly just calming myself down, and the time basically helped to get some distance on it, and realize that it was just a question of maybe just a little bit of plot or a little bit of a like something, just like a rope for the reader to hold on to and guide them through. Because first it was just like relentless, just constant like violence. Just that was it. It was just a vomit of violence, which to be fair was my initial, and I think it worked well to have that as a first draft because that was my initial goal, was to write a small novel, a novella that was just like getting stabbed constantly in the gut. Like that was what I wanted the reader to experience. But then, after much thinking and questioning, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to write that. I don't know if I can write that right now successfully. And secondly, I'm not sure anybody would ever read it. And, I want people to read it, someone at least. And then my mom cried. It was awful. She didn't like it at all. She was like, you're destroying your career. You're not ready for this. It was awful. I had a really hard time of it. But then, with time, I edited and I think it went well.
Well, two things. I think that when we have many drafts and we take detours and we make what other people would consider mistakes, if at the end of it you have a good work, then it's not,
Mm.
none of them were mistakes.
No.
If you don't finish the book and it never comes together, then yes, that was terrible. But
Well,
what?
still, you will have learned something from it anyway,
Right,
probably, and you will have
right.
at least trained your. Yeah, that's absolutely true. You're right. I just had such a. I was so afraid that I couldn't see straight, I think. Now that some time has gone by, I realize that's kind of what it was. And, I've always hated editing because I've always taken it as like a personal affront. And that's not
Really?
really what it is. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I just don't like, I'm such a slow writer. I write like I can't go on to the next sentence unless the one I'm working on I feel sounds perfect and has the correct rhythm and language. I can't move on. So it takes me really long to finish a sentence and move on to the next one. So I end up memorizing it to such an extent that if I later change just one word in that sentence, it's gonna really throw me off and it's gonna really irritate me. Because I've taken so long with it already. I've learned it by heart. So the rhythm of the line is all off anyway. But that's just, yeah, that's not how writers have to edit. That's something I'm still kind of learning. I dislike editing a lot.
No, but you just raised a point that I found fascinating, and you raised the point that what really won me over with this book. I mean, there was many aspects of the story won me over. Nadi, of course, and the need to know how far she'll go, her backstory. I actually liked Mrs. Pounds. I thought that she's so vivid and so inept and
I like
insecure.
her.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Bless
and
her.
and just the ambience in the sense that
Mm.
I was trapped in Nadi's darkness too. But
Yeah.
what I admired and surrendered is your use of language. And you just hinted at that a bit. I found your sentences, individual sentences, to be ideally constructed, well balanced, no
Mm.
fat, precise. And I think you've begun to answer this question already, but how do you do that? Do you labor at that, or does it flow in that way for you?
Hmm. Sometimes I'll hear it. I mean, I think I'm very musically inclined in a way, and the rhythm and the lilt of a sentence is very important to me. So if I read it, even if out loud or just in my head or whatever, I will gauge, if it's working or not, just based on musicality. But then also I'm a huge, I'm hugely obsessed with words, specific words and their connotations and whether they appear fresh and like, I overuse the thesaurus basically, um, heavily. I just, is there any way to say this that is fresher, more original, or that'll make the reader go, huh, interesting. I've never seen that mix before or something. And I feel like maybe the fact that English isn't my first language, it's because I'm Spanish, has
Right.
something to do with it as well. Sometimes it takes me longer or I to form a sentence, where I go through or I use words that aren't normally used to convey that sentiment because I'm translating from the Spanish or vice versa. So it'll be an interesting mix. Some words I don't know if they exist in one language or the other. Sometimes I'll translate and then, that word won't exist or it will exist, but it won't have the same meaning or, one word I think means something in English translate to Spanish and it turns out it means something different. And so I think that mix makes me very something. I don't I don't know what,
But
but obsessed, I guess, with the use of specific words in sentences.
no, I'm beginning to get a sense of you. And
Hmm.
I don't think,
Sorry.
no, not at all. I don't think it's dichotomous to labor over sentences that come easily, or
Sure.
or
Well, it might to some.
yes, that's right. For some writers, that may not be their way. But I also don't think it's terribly unusual to look at something you've written and say, "Wow, I wrote that. That that
Yeah.
came out of me."
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
because we're operating on a different plane then.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
know if you
that's interesting.
agree or not, but um,
Yeah, sometimes. Although, yeah, some of them, as I will always have memorized. Like a kind of like a script or what. I studied drama in college, and I kind of I still kind of remember some lines from plays that I performed in like 2007 or whatever, and the rhythm that with which I spoke them. So that'll happen. But then other times you're right. It's like, who wrote this? I don't remember. Did I write this? Um, and there's also in this book specifically, there's a heavy influence from obviously Victorian prose and language and words and sentences and rhythms that I know exactly where I got. Like I know how many of them come from The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which was my introduction to Yorkshire and the Yorkshire dialect. Unfortunately, I want to apologize to the people of Yorkshire, but that's where that came from. And and some of them from like the Brontes and Dickens, and I know exactly when I reread them, I'm like, yes, that's where you got this from.
Right.
Remember?
Are you a fan of the subconscious mind, sort of concept that the muse actually is the subconscious mind, and that the subconscious mind is a problem solver? Um,
Hmm.
have you heard of this concept or no?
I'm not an expert. Am I a fan of it? Maybe. I mean, I don't know how healthy it is to think, oh, my subconscious mind will figure it out. I know I do that a lot, but I don't know if it's a good thing,
Well,
because
I think
one day it's going to bite me in the ass, probably.
because I think what happens when you have those moments where you say, "Oh, I wrote this," that's the subconscious mind has leaked through to the conscious mind. That's what I know nothing, by the way. I was an
Mm.
English major 1,000 years ago, but I remember one time I said to Van Morrison, how did you write this? And he said, well, I'm just a vehicle. I'm just a vessel, and it flows through me. And
Mm.
I said to him, well, if that's the case, then it could happen to anyone, right? And he said, yes, I suppose so. And I said, well, then why are you so,
No.
I said, why are you so good? And the rest of us aren't that good. And he said, well, I know I'm good. It wasn't the answer I was looking for, but
Yeah, that's all that matters.
right.
Uh, yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I'd describe it that way. I mean, I guess we all are, yeah, we were all different, complicated, make like conclusions of like a recipe that has been built over years and any number of art that we've kind of balanced, yeah, unconsciously in our somewhere inside of us, and then we all kind of mix it together without even realizing that we're taking from ingredients from all over the place, and that's true, and we don't realize we're doing it, I suppose, and that's why each one of us is very, very uniquely appointed to what we write. I think nobody else could write that exact same thing because nobody is that exact same mix of
Yes, yes.
yeah,
If
of works and references and languages and experiences, I guess.
Well, if we've done what you've done, Virginia, which is write two entirely different types of books as
Mm.
expressions of something of meaning to you, distinctly to you. People who try to write like other people, that doesn't happen.
Mm.
You know?
Well, we all try to write like other people, no? But again, me imitating whoever Dickens is not going to be the same as you imitating Dickens ever. And we're both gonna pick and choose very unique elements, I think. Like, and I think I encourage us to try to imitate other artists always, and to plagiarize even, because you're never going to do it exactly the same way, and the choices you make are going to be so much more interesting. The things you decide to leave out or the things that you do decide to imitate are going to be so unique that they're going to just build you a completely different personality
Oh, that's
to
interesting.
the one that you were trying to imitate in the first place.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think, and it's just there is any number of combinations that's infinite, so that relieves me. I'm very, I don't know, I'm a very alert person. I'm a very obsessive person, and I'm very always like in fear of everything, of mistakes, or I don't know, death and illness constantly. I can't be hypnotized. A therapist tried once. It was a disaster. I'm just too alert. And I guess this is all a very long-winded way of saying that I'm not a fan of the things I can't control, like unconscious, subconscious. I like conscious
Yeah.
mostly, but I do appreciate that somewhere in my brain, something is happening. Also, when I procrastinate a lot and the deadline is looming, and I'm like, nope, I'm just gonna keep watching the Kardashians, and it'll somehow just come together because it always does. And then it does, because I would rather probably die than miss a deadline, and my subconscious knows this, so my subconscious is working for me, and I appreciate it. Thank you,
Great.
subconscious.
So what you have in Victoria Psycho is almost metronomic rhythm in each sentence, and the description of the macabre and the grotesque told in a matter of fact way.
Hmm.
To me, that's the hidden hand of craft that makes us Nadi's prisoners in a sense. That is, she, meaning you, have trapped us in ways readers may not realize. I mean, that's the power of precise language.
Hmm. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
No,
I like to think she's manipulating us, me
yeah,
included. As most psychopaths are said to do, and trying to charming us essentially with humor or wit or language in this case, or the correct dose of historical and anachronistic, I guess. Um,
but,
um,
but rhythm is a powerful tool for capturing and holding on to the reader.
yes, absolutely. And I
Right?
feel like a lot of times I would joke when I was writing this, I'd say this is like my stand-up comedy book. That's what this is. And a lot, most of stand-up comedy is rhythm, right? And
Right.
yeah, and timing. That's how I saw it.
But and that's another great point about this because the relief from this barrage of macabre and grotesqueness is humor.
Hmm.
And I have to admit that I didn't know whether to recoil or to laugh at certain scenes. I was waiting for Noddy, or therefore you, to give me permission to laugh. And then once I realized that every now and then you were winking at the reader,
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Isn't that what you just described? Isn't that kind of life, right? You don't know whether to laugh or cry a lot of the
Right.
time. It's
Right.
just constant, like, grotesque, dramatic events unfolding. But then, we have to laugh. Otherwise, I mean, I personally wouldn't know how to survive life
Without right.
without laughing at everything. I just can't, just make a really, really inappropriate joke. Otherwise, I don't know how to go on. And about, but the grotesque, as you say, I like to, I like to think it's pretty in a way. I mean, I like to think that the language is, because it is, language is so beautiful and it and romantic that it can kind of make the grotesque more lyrical. And there's also a defense mechanism for me, being, as obsessive compulsive as I am, and a lot of things basically just gross me out. And to try to transmit that to the reader. And on the one hand, it's so the reader will agree with me. Yes, everything is gross. You're right. Life is awful. Let's all be hypochondriacs forever. And on the other hand, it's a way for me to, it's therapy, I guess, for me to be like, oh, it's not so bad if you wrap it in beautiful language.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it, you, the words the descriptive words you choose are so appealing,
Mm,
you know, and I think this may happen to you as a writer and a journalist, as in addition to being a reader. Every now and then, when we're reading, we say to ourselves, "Oh, I would have done it that way,"
mm.
or "I wish I had done it that way."
Yes, absolutely.
So, of course, that's how I started out with the book. But after a while, I just completely surrendered to the language, and as I said, you lovingly had us trapped, and I love that. And if you don't mind, can we go back to your grandmother's death?
Yeah, of course.
You know, Nadi is immune to fear, and she's
Yeah.
dismissive of pain. Um,
Mm.
I think you said something earlier that when your grandmother died, you had to protect yourself from pain. Did you say that?
Maybe. Yeah, I wanted to numb it. I think I said.
Yeah, that's right.
I
That's
think I
right.
said, or yeah, there were a lot of feelings.
Right.
Good ones, bad ones. It was all so much. It was a bit. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a bit. Yeah. Overwhelming, I
Did
guess.
and did that help inform Nadi? What, or was she a different character before that?
No, that you're right. Yeah, it was. I was in such a weird, aggressive mood where sort of nothing seemed to matter, but at the same time was trying to hold on to like a hope that it would all be okay in the end. Uh, and meanwhile I was reading all this awful, facts and research on Victorian life and the abuse towards women and children that was so normalized. It was ridiculous, and it was kind of like aggressively laughing as I, took this all in and created this character who was also very, aggressive, but finds it all very, very funny. But that on the one hand, I was going through something that Naughty might have, gone through, but at the same time, it was also therapeutic to write from the point of view of someone who doesn't give a shit. It was very, very very fun. And it does the anti-me, essentially. It's just is delightful. She doesn't care at all. And I care so much. I care excessively about everything. I care about an email that I sent 3 weeks ago. Still wondering about that email. Like, should I have edited that one line? I don't know. Was that joke too much? Just and Naughty just does not give a shit. And I find and uses it, even does it, like, doesn't really hide her nature that much. Like, she doesn't make any effort at all in front of anybody, and people just ignore it, I think, because they can't, like, imagine that what she just said really happened, or what she just did really happened, I think. So it was very, yeah.
One thing you did, you do very early on, which I questioned, and then I thought, oh, of course, she reveals to one of the children who she is.
Right.
She doesn't conceal that she's going to do some very bad things, and has
no,
and it's wonderful.
It's what's worked for her thus far. I think that's what she's thinking. She's thinking, well, listen, it's going great for me, and nothing bad has happened to me. And so I don't know, are people awake, or am I actually doing these things? Like, is she really saying and doing these things, or are people just asleep? Either could be true. And yeah, and what we were saying about my grandmother's, death, I'm very afraid of death, and death is very affecting, obviously, I think, for many of us, but like, she doesn't get it. Winifred doesn't understand why it's that important. I think that's very refreshing to someone like me who was obsessed with it, and very, very frightened of it, and very sad about it. But I guess, when you don't have any ties to any other human beings, then I guess it doesn't really matter, which is a relief on on the one hand. On the other hand, kind of toxic and dangerous for society, but for the individual, I have to say, it's very refreshing. I would like that just once, just one day.
Well, you allow us to judge. She's not judging herself at all. No. So we could say, Naughty, come on,
Yeah, but we're all giggling along with her,
right?
So we should feel terrible because we're kind of well, not allowing it to happen, but we're kind of laughing along with her, and she's manipulating us into laughing along further and further and further until we're like, oh wait, no, we've crossed the line, and she's like, well, too late now. Here.
So I have to ask, you're 2 for 2 in Hollywood options. Where is Mrs. March at now? Is development still ongoing?
Mrs. March is, we're still on the script stage, developing the script at this point.
And
so pre-production has not started. Okay. Victorian Psycho is starting pre-production soon, I believe.
So it did leap ahead of Mrs. March then.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it went really fast. And that script, I would say that it's finished, but I'm starting to sort of learn that in Hollywood, a script is never really finished. You kind of keep adding to it, or editing it as you go along, because certain things just pop up, like I don't know, like budget issues. So sometimes it's like, oh, this scene that we'd written, it's not going to fit in the budget, so we have to replace it. Or I don't know, the set is different, so you needed 3 windows for this scene, and now you're going to have to deal with 1 window, so you're going to have to redo it. So that kind of thing, up until the last minute, presumably. But it's but it is more advanced. Yes.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Can you talk about that?
Right now I'm that's a good question. I feel like I'm working so much, and now I'm wondering what it is I'm working on. I'm thinking of more scripts that I think I took this year. This is like my Hollywood year. I'm gonna try to push really hard in Hollywood this year, and so I'm working on original scripts as well as the adaptations that we discussed. And I do have like some idea for the third novel, but I don't know yet. I haven't yet had that spark that we talked about where I'm sure, I just want to grab it and have a relationship with it. But I have some contenders. I'm not sure which one is gonna seduce me yet.
Have you just one more question? I know
Yeah.
you're in Madrid, yes, right now?
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we have a time difference. Uh, has it occurred to you that you have a career as a writer?
Has it occurred to me
Yeah.
that yeah, I
You've
think
in other words, you've done it.
I think so. I mean, I'm cautiously going to say I believe I am a writer. Is that what you're is that what you mean?
No, no, you are a writer, but
Right.
you have a career as a writer. Two different things. I'm a writer.
I know.
I'm hanging on by my fingernails on the glass surface here, but you're not. You have a career as a writer.
Have a career as a writer. I think I do. But
Yeah.
again, but it's very flighty, isn't it? So I might not in 2 years. You know what I mean? So I think I do today.
Oh, I would bet. I would bet on you. I really.
Oh, that's well, let's not, just don't. Just in case. I'm very, very cautiously, but I do often say to my husband, like, God, I love my job. I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad I left advertising and did and tried to initiate a career as a writer. I really hope it lasts, but yeah, you never know, isn't it? It's a very delicate sort of job, isn't it?
Yes.
And career.
My guest on Writers at Work has been Virginia Feito, author of Victorian Psycho, a novel I thoroughly enjoyed and recommend for so many reasons. Virginia, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusili. Until next time, happy reading.